Welcome back to The Edge and our story based in Cape Couve. So far, our intrepid reporter Artemis Farrow has confronted town patriarch Zoltan, or rather his imposing castle. As any good reporter does, she digs into her research, where she meets more interesting Cape Couve residents and their uncanny connection with each other. Welcome to Cape Couve.
I'm Jason Litz. This is Cape Couve, Episode 3. Artemis Farrow is a former reporter who moved to the Cape Couve a few months ago. Her reporting job had disappeared when her Midwestern newspaper was bought up by a regional publisher, and her services were suddenly no longer needed. She pointed her car west and found herself in Cape Couve, a quiet Pacific Northwest seaside town, where appearances rarely revealed what was really happening. Artemis was itching to write again. Following her habit, she interviewed the locals, the shop owners, fishermen, and others, thinking of stories to write as she did. Today, she was meeting with the mayor.
She watched the pink tinge on the morning fog as it crept through the pines she saw from her window. She was staying at the local residence hotel, the Dewdrop Inn, avoiding the proprietor, Mrs. Johnson, and her smoker's cough if at all possible. She dressed, finished the vile coffee — she would look for a drip coffee maker later, she thought — and grabbed the leash.
"Come on, Bounder,"
she said to her dog.
"Let's go."
They left the inn and walked up the quiet main street. Most of the shops hadn't turned over their closed signs yet. The sting of the salt air tickled her nose. The church tower announced it was now 9 o'clock, and she arrived at City Hall, an old gingerbread Victorian mansion left over from some prior effort to develop the town's tourist trade.
"Come on, boy,"
Artemis said, as she and Bounder climbed the unpainted steps, opened the door, and scanned the directory. The mayor's office was on the 3rd floor.
"Good morning,"
Said Artemis to the heavily tattooed woman sitting at the front desk.
"And you are?"
Said the receptionist.
"Artemis Farrow."
Said Artemis, a little bothered by the way the receptionist, who couldn't have been more than 25, was looking her up and down.
"You're new here, aren't you?"
I guess,"
Answered Artemis.
"I have an appointment."
"Sure you do."
Said the tattooed lady, who looked at her phone.
"Yeah, here it is. Go ahead and sit down.
Said the receptionist.
I'm Esme. Here's a cookie for your dog. I'll be right back."
When you're new to a town and looking to start a new business, you sit when you're told. She sat. Esme left a heavy scent of patchouli behind her, which Artemis recognized from her eons ago. The space was spare. Pictures of historic Cape Couve lined the wall behind the receptionist's desk. There was a picture of an old bearded man, seemingly from a century ago, opposite. Empty planters, a few stacking chairs, not much to make it welcoming.
Artemis came here to see about starting a newspaper. She wanted to be a voice for this quirky town. Its businesses, cultural activities, sports, schools, really what a local newspaper does that a regional operation that had killed her job couldn't do. People seemed receptive. Just yesterday she was talking about reporting with Zeus, a 10-year-old son of a woman who ran the local coffee shop. He may be a cub reporter in the making, Artemis thought. Esme reappeared.
"The mayor won't see you today."
She said.
"What? I made this appointment weeks ago."
Said Artemis.
"Yeah, well, that's it. Too bad."
Esme sat down at her desk.
"But
"You're not the first.
Said Esme.
Get in line."
Artemis looked at her. She knew Esme also worked at the local cannabis shop. It seemed everyone here worked at least 2 jobs. It was a small town. She said.
"Do you think if I waited a bit he would see me?"
"Probably not.
Said Esme.
He's not here.
"But who were you?"
The controller. He calls the shots."
Artemis attempted to respond, but Esme beat her to it.
"Mark Zimmer, if you want to know."
"Well, can he see me?"
"Don't know."
"Could you ask? Or maybe I could ask?"
"Maybe."
Said Esme.
"Help yourself."
She shrugged and started texting.
Clearly, this was not what Artemis had anticipated, but this was something she was used to when dealing with government officials. Though pushing her way past receptionists was usually harder than this, she grabbed her portfolio and Bounder's leash, and they headed down the hall to the controller's office.
Come in.
Said a voice before Artemis had reached the door.
Door's open.
Artemis pushed on the door to reveal a room filled with light. The controller was much younger than she had anticipated and expected. Late 30s, maybe 40.
Come in,
Said Mark Zimmer.
Glad you came. You persisted. Good sign.
He was a good-looking man. Solid build, sandy short hair, and a slight mustache. Collared shirt with rolled-up sleeves, even this early in the morning. A manicure, Artemis noted. He walked over to adjust the blinds and waved at her to sit.
I'm Mark Zimmer, Cape Couve's controller. You won't meet our mayor today, or any day, unless he wants to, in which case he will contact you. You can't make an appointment with him.
Artemis stared at Mark Zimmer in the bright morning light.
But
She started.
That's how it is.
He said, settling behind his desk.
Zoltan. He lives in that castle you visited a few weeks ago, with the hounds barking. The place you couldn't get in.
Artemis nodded silently, surprised he knew about her visit to the castle when she first arrived in Cape Couve. She had been alone. No one should know, though she had mentioned it at the Rainbow Bistro.
Don't worry,
Said Mark.
we all know. And so does Zoltan. He's our mayor, has been for years. Almost never comes into town. But so far, he has no problem with you.
Artemis took a breath, but was cut off before she could speak.
I understand you want to start a newspaper. We could use one,
Continued Mark.
of the right sort.
He added.
Here's a file on our local media. TV, radio, print. Most fail, but always room for a new effort. I'll see you again after you've had a chance to read it.
He held up a thick file and stood, ushering her back to the door.
You're luckier than most.
He added with a smile.
Most times, reporters are gone before they get this far. Seems Zoltan may have a different idea about you.
He nodded, handing her the file.
Good luck.
She took the file and stepped back as the door closed, leaving her with Bounder in the hall.
okay.
Artemis thought and turned. She walked past Esme, who was deeply engaged on her phone. The fog was gone, and she and Bounder emerged from the building.
For a moment she stood there. He knew. They all knew. I mean, she had known small towns before this, but this was more than spooky. She turned and headed back up Main Street. The sun was up. Activity was picking up as she walked slowly and then walking more quickly with a purpose. Bounder making an effort to keep up. She headed to the Rainbow Bistro. She needed a good sit down with the bistro owners and maybe also with their son, her cub reporter, Zeus.
Bounder,
She said, shaking her head at what had just happened.
we have our work cut out for us.
That's the scoop from Cape Couve, where time isn't even a concept. It's the